Greetings, diners and other viewers, and welcome to another edition of the Collapse Cafe here on the Doomstead Diner. And we have a black hole of money in the diner. It swallows it up. And before we get into our topic for the day, as I said, the month of June, I'd be begging all month for money. I'm begging again, okay? Because I still did not reach my goal of funding the diner, which is maybe half of what it costs me. Would be good, okay? So if you've got any spare change, drop it on the diner donate button. You can use your PayPal. If you're going to give us a big donation, $1,000 or more, go to the Sun website, because there you'll get a tax deduction for it. And notify me, please, if you're going to make that kind of contribution. And then the third way is when you purchase items on Amazon, use the smile.amazon.com subweb. All right? Every purchase you make, Jeff Bezos sends us a tiny, tiny part of it, okay? And it costs you nothing. It's the same price for the item on smile.amazon.com subweb as it is on the main amazon.com web, all right? So it doesn't cost you a dime. And, if all of you watchers of the videos on YouTube and the readers of the Diner blog and the lurkers on the Diner forum and the chit-chatters on Diner Facebook, if all of you made a contribution, we'd be swimming in money, okay? But that hasn't happened yet, unfortunately. Okay, that's enough begging. All right, for today, we're going to talk about a difficult topic that has reached equal status with coronavirus in the news cycle. Okay, if you go to Google, you got about half coronavirus stories and half race stories of one type or another. There are several of those ongoing, and race has really come to the forefront here as a big problem, okay, big social problem that we have as we mosey on down the Collapse Highway. And so for today, I'm talking with two of the other diner admins. One of them, Mansa 666, hails from the United Kingdom, and he's one of our younger diners. So we also have a generation differences of opinion or perceptions or so forth of what's going on based on our generations. And then my longtime partner in crime, Surly, who is one of our most vocal political critics on the diner. He has strong opinions. Okay? He has strong opinions. So that's what I'll say. And so, okay. Introductions are over, gentlemen. And so, given the political end of things on the diner is your bailiwick, Surly, I'm going to go to you to lead off the discussion and pick one of those areas that you think you want to treat first. And take it away.
Well, I wonder if the moment we saw last week, where Bill Barr supposedly gave the order to clear clear Lafayette Square with tear gas, flashbangs and assorted beatings was not the defining moment of the Trump presidency, or rather what's left of it. That encapsulates everything that I believe we're going to talk about today, which is police brutality and the incredible lack of awareness on the part of police and police unions for their PR. When people are protesting over police brutality, and you respond by doubling down on brutality, it's almost incomprehensible. I mean, last week we saw where a protester named Martin Gugino was pushed over. He was doing nothing. He was just shoved over, and those police that stopped to help or to at least inquire as to his well-being were ordered by their superiors to keep walking as the guy bled from the ear. So I'm put it this way: is in the marketing pukes would say it's a bad look, and now you have people. There's a growing movement in this country called defund the police, which is really quite a misnomer, because this is going to get every Karen in the U.S. clutching her pearls and saying, well, who are we going to call when they're bad actors? No, the fact is that we ask the police to do altogether too much in this country. Plus, we've armed them to the teeth, and they get training saying that they need to be warrior cops. So there are a number of different things that are webbed together that put the police, who admittedly have a very difficult job at the best of times, in a very bad light. And there's a lot to tease apart here. But my opening bid was that perhaps Trump defined his so-called presidency last week by having Bill Barr clear Lafayette Square and for a photo op where he could hold up a Bible like a sandwich ticket at Subway.
Yeah. It was pretty pathetic overall, and the stunts that he's pulling, and then he made a tweet that even the Republicans were embarrassed about. I can't remember what the content of the tweet was, but it was it was to be reviled, is all I can say. So I pushed it out of my memory. So what about over in Britain, Monsa? How are the police reacting in the situations? You've got statues being pushed over there of the slavers who basically built the British Empire. And that sort of business. They have taken up the Black Lives Matter banner as well there in England and also in France. They've had big demonstrations. In fact, all of the European countries that were part of the Colonial Powers in the 16th and 17th centuries that engaged in the slave trade heavily, and then since Europe has spent the last 50 years or so importing people from Africa to handle the scut work of society, and so you have a very large black underclass now in Europe as well as here in the United States. So all that being said, Mansa, how are you perceiving what's going on in the UK at the moment?
I mean, I think the initial protests that happened in England were more along the lines of the George Floyd murder. They felt it was very unjust, and it was more an act of solidarity. Like, they felt like this is a grievous misjustice, and they felt that they had to protest to show that they're supporting the black people in America. that was a general sentiment of the people in London. And they went and did these protests despite official government advice saying, no, you shouldn't go out to protest on the street because it violates the coronavirus lockdown laws. But largely, I think, for the most part, the protests have been quite peaceful. There is a bit of rioting, but I think it's quite limited. And as far as I'm aware, the police haven't really taken any dramatic action against people. They've largely allowed things to happen. Like one of the things that you highlighted was about the taking down of statues. And the one that people have seen the most on the TV was the takedown of the statue of Edward Colston, which was in Brighton. The police were actually present the whole time. They witnessed the whole thing, but they decided not to take action because they just thought it would just escalate the situation. And I think that actually highlights one of the things that's a bit different with the UK police. They don't want to escalate situations. They're all about de-escalating. So at the time, they made a judgment call, and they just thought if we sort of took action at that particular moment, it would have flared up into something much bigger. And the thing is, you know, with these type of things, you can get a situation where they're protesting in Bristol, but then you get copycat protests, and it becomes a much bigger thing because they'll say like the police are defending the system, defending the institutional racism that is, you know, a big perception, you know, even in society today. And one of the things I would highlight is it's not that long ago that there were major protests in England. I mean, there was, this is just about 10 years ago, there was the murder of this person called Mark Dugan, and he was killed by a police officer, and that triggered the riots in London in 2011. So it's still kind of fresh. So that's why I think it was a very sensitive topic, but this is the thing that the police grasped. They're kind of, there's an awareness. And I think this is the thing with what I've witnessed, or at least my understanding, is the American police seem to be a bit tone deaf. You know, people are protesting about police brutality and the injustice of it. And then what happens? They kick down a 75-year-old man. I mean, it's like, you know, it's really bad, but in a way, if you look at it in a positive way, it kind of puts it to bear how dysfunctional the police are. You know, in a situation where they know they're on the spotlight, they do the worst thing that they, you know, if I told them to do the worst thing, that would be it. And that's the thing that
about the only thing worse would have been maybe if they pushed over a crippled kid. Okay, that might be worse. Okay, but you know, it's just outrageous, just inexcusable behavior, and you know, and then on top of that, to have their superiors tell them to march on. You know, the guy was in the ICU for a couple of days. 2 or 3 days. He was seriously hurt by this act. I mean, it wasn't a nothing burger. You know, it was bad. And
one of the things, I mean, to piggyback on that point, is that one of the things that I saw recently was in some demonstration, police had shot a disabled person in a wheelchair with a rubber bullet.
Remind me not to go out on my cripple cart to any demonstrations.
Well, I don't think you're going to get too many demonstrations in Alaska. Are there any demonstrations in Alaska?
Yes, we had a march in Palmer. There was a solidarity march with Black Lives Matter over in Palmer, and it was composed of all white people.
Right.
Because we don't have black people in Alaska.
But that's a really important point, Ari. That really is, because the reason that, I mean, we've been watching young black men be summarily executed by cops in various municipalities with no consequence and no bag limit. We've been seeing it for years. Yet this George Floyd phenomenon has brought out white people en masse. I credit, first of all, a younger generation who have grown up in a post-racial context who are sick and tired of listening to this shit. Secondly, I credit, millions upon millions of people being out of work and have nothing better to do their time than to go out and lend themselves to a cause they deem worthy.
That's a very big aspect of this.
Yes, certainly. And so you got a whole lot of people who have had a lot of, and then there's Trump. And Trump, just every time he opens his pie hole or sets his tiny little Twitter thumbs to tweeting, enrages people and just fuels the fire. So there's a lot of pent-up rage in the street, and it's all unfurled themselves. But isn't it a shame that, and I guess it's just the way it is, because in this country we got, 15 to 20% of African Americans. But it takes white people getting energized and getting in the streets. And you notice we're not turning Bull Connor's dogs loose on them. We're not turning the fire hoses loose on them. And a couple episodes of tear gas and a couple of police cruisers driven into crowds, notwithstanding, when they de-escalate, the crowd de-escalates. I mean, there's actually 20 years worth of research to indicate that the response of the police really sets the tone for what's going to happen. And, I'm not making it up. I could, if I took a minute, I could probably look it up. But, I mean, he actually right here, the Kerner Commission, assigned by Johnson in '67 to assess the causes of the rape riots, found that the response of the police departments to the protests made the problem worse. I could go on, but why? That is the point.
Yeah, well, it's, violence, of course, begets violence. And, it starts up pretty small, a riot. You get an agitator from one side or the other, okay, because there are both the left side agitators, the boys in black pajamas, as I like to call them. And then there's, the white hoods out there, the far right people. And they will, break a window or two or three or four. There was one guy with the umbrella man, with a sledgehammer and whatnot. It was just breaking windows, right?
Right, that was up in Minneapolis. Some people had identified him as an off-duty St. Paul policeman, and then there were contradictory reports that wasn't him. But apparently he'd been blown in by his ex-wife or ex-fiance or something.
Yeah, well, if it wasn't him, the resemblance was remarkable.
There you go.
So, he has an evil twin out there, I guess. And so that happens. And then the cops take the property damage, and I make a distinction in violence between property damage and physical violence between people. The fighting, the rubber bullets, the tear gas, et cetera, et cetera. And the police reaction to property damage is violence, real violence, to start hitting people. They take it as a license to go in there with the billy clubs and to fire the rubber bullets and to fire the tear gas, because, hey, the most important thing here is that we protect the property, all right? And that's the police's job. It really, it's not protecting life, it's protecting property, and it's protecting the capitalist class, all right? And I go on and on about this at the diner. I'm the red on the diner. Oh well, there are other ones, but I'm about as far left as you get. All right, as I like to say, 10 degrees left of Che Guevara. All of this stuff, the racial violence, everything is rooted in economics. and the capitalist system and its evolution for the last 400, 500 years. The importation of blacks as cheap labor, and now they're still slave labor, okay? Just now we imprison them by the truckload, and then we use the prison labor as slave labor, okay? And those prisons have been privatized, and they go to the private profit of still more capitalists, okay? And so it's this cycle. And down at the street level, it comes down to the property damage to the small businesses and the small businessmen, okay? And the small businessman, you know, thinks of himself as the core of capitalism, but he isn't, all right? The core of capitalism is at the top. And it's in the money supply that we all have to use. And there's no escaping it right now. And that's yet another topic. All right, I'm going to get off of that aspect of things. Perhaps I'll do it in another episode and do a monologue on it. So we have that ongoing. And, you know, another one of the topics that has come up quite a bit in this discussion is a more generalized topic, and something that, you know, gives a lot of white people pause and reason to complain, if you will. And that's the concept of white privilege. And I have my own thoughts on that one too, but I'm going to start here with Monsta and get his take on what the term white privilege means and how it's interpreted and how it's played out from his perspective in England and as a black man. So, Monsta, you want to give us your thoughts on white privilege?
I mean, you know, I think the concept itself is very real. Like, you know, it works in all aspects of life. You know, like if I apply for a job and I have an English sounding name or I look like the boss, then the probability of getting hired for a job is far greater. And, you know, in these times when people are struggling to get jobs, it does matter quite a lot. You know, we have the current coronavirus scare. But, you know, when I was graduating from university, we had the financial crisis. So, you know, these opportunities mean a lot. And, you know, I don't have a Western sounding name. And so you do automatically get stigmatized just out of the bat. So, you know, job opportunities is one aspect of it. Crime is another. And even just being suspected of crimes, like, one of the things I remember is there was a London bombings in 2006. Immediately after the London bombings, I got searched through. I got 3 random searches by the police, and you know, by the third time, I was like getting pissed off at the cops, and I was like saying, "Look, why do you keep searching me? Do you search 70-year-old white women?" I said that to the police officer, and they were like,
Not a good idea.
no, this is just random searches. And you know, this in your face all the time. You know my experiences when I traveled to America. You know what happened there. And so, you know, these are the type of things that may seem kind of like, what are you talking about? But it's just something that rams in your face all the time if you're not white. So
Right.
the aspect of it is very real, I feel. So I'm not disagreeing with the aspect that white privilege does not exist. I think it definitely does exist. But the problem I have with the term white privilege is that it kind of almost sort of makes it like a shameful thing. Like if I'm white, I should be ashamed that I get white privilege. That's the undertone that I'm getting from the term that I don't think is very productive, because with certain people, they'll feel like, I can't help it that I'm white. Why are you targeting me? it's kind of like a bit of a stigmatizing term. And when you want society to progress or like get rid of these chains, you need involvement from as many people as possible. You need participation. So I just think it's better to use more inclusive language. Like the thing that I would always say, instead of saying white privilege, you say, I want equal opportunities. Because there are a lot of white people who are on the lower rungs that do feel disadvantaged. So when you ask for equal opportunities, you're not only helping the blacks, but you're also helping the white people who are poor to getting what they want. So it's kind of like you're turning your problem into everyone's problem. And then who's going to argue against equal opportunities? It's much harder for the opposition to say, no, that's wrong. That doesn't exist, because, you know, there's a glass ceiling still. I think everyone can see that. So I just think instead of talking about how whites have an advantage, just talk about we need everyone to be on a level playing field. That's what I think would be better, because at the end of the day, that's what do black people want? They want to have an equal chance of getting things. They want a justice system that treats everyone the same. They want police officers to treat everyone the same.
We got a freeze up.
Even playing field. And
Oh,
I just think if you want to achieve those kind of goals and objectives, you have to watch your language, and you have to try and use inclusive language, whatever you do. That's my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Fair enough.
Right.
Let me
Sure.
respond to that.
Okay.
Yeah.
One of the things about white privilege that gets so much pushback is the lived experience of so many white people. You referred to this, Monster. And the fact is that we got people on the Diner Forum, and RE knows exactly some of the people I'm talking about, who will, I mean, their attitude is not in so many words. You know, I worked my way all the way up. I'm a regular Horatio Alger story. Nobody ever gave me anything. And all of that is true. So how can you argue or try to attempt to negate somebody's lived experience? That's not reasonable. But the fact is, white privilege in this country is like water, and you're a fish, and you're swimming in it. It is structural. And what structural racism means is that the lived experience of a white person in this country is very, very different from the lived experience of a black person in this country. I worked with a guy years ago who opened my eyes. Comes the dawn. You know, I was one of these typical white guys as a creative and as a manager and a leader. I didn't see race, okay, and I thought that was a really good thing. I try to deal with everybody fairly and on their merits. Sounds great, right? He's the one who over drinks broke it down for me. This guy used to be a Black Panther. He used to hate white people for a living. But I mean, we were working at the same TV station, and he just broke it. He just said, basically, you know, you get to be above race. You get to be beyond race. The rest of us never do, referring to black people. He said, you know, every time you go into a store, you get the floor walkers, the cameras. People are following you around looking, what are you doing? You know, it's just, you get, you know, the unnecessary stops that you alluded to yourself on that day of, you know, of driving while black or walking while black, the unnecessary screenings, the endless suspicion. And this is just for the people that have the good and happy luck to not get rousted, to not get assaulted, to not get beaten, to not get have to endure false charges. Social media in this country has been replete with episodes of usually white women referred to as Karens, who will call and complain about black people doing almost nothing. And it's just, it speaks to fear, and it's kind of pathetic, but it is the way it is. But so, to come back to my main point, because I don't want to just beat my gums all day, the racism is structural. because the laws are structural. This country was founded on the whole idea of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, which translate directly to the pursuit of property. All of our laws are about the preservation of property. And even the 13th Amendment, which ended slavery, has a loophole a mile wide that you can drive through, because the 13th Amendment has a clause that says slavery is illegal except as a consequence of legal incarceration. And today we have a private prison system, and that depends on markets for prison slave labor. This country, the United States, has 5% of the world's population. We have 25% of the world's prisoners. Guess what color most of them are? I could go on, but I think I'll put a period or at least a semicolon on that and give it back to you, Ari. You look like you had something to say.
Oh, yeah. I'm going to talk in an area that I have great knowledge of on the economic level of how it works, and that's the trucking industry.
Sure.
I was a trucker for 7 years in various roles. I was a company driver for a while, and then I was an owner-operator for a while. And I worked for several different trucking companies, and then I used different brokers all the time. And God only knows how many loading docks and warehouses that I hit in 7 years. And, you know, a trucker will say, you know, we don't have a white privilege in trucking, okay? Anybody can drive a truck, and you see as many black people and other various shades of colors as white people. And in fact, that's true, okay? In fact, there's probably more than the number of white people that are truckers these days. And that's part of the nature of the job, so forth, so on. But see, that's not where it falls, okay? Where it falls is at other levels in the industry, and it's a big industry. It doesn't just include truckers. If you go to the loading docks, you never see a white face in there, loading and unloading. We call them lumpers, the trucks. Those are all third world people, imports from, you know, South and Central America, black people. Not too many Mexicans, actually, believe it or not. I think that they end up doing the farm work or something, I don't know. But plenty of people from Nicaragua and so forth, find Ecuador. And so that portion of the industry is all black, okay? Or third world, whatever you want to call it. The underclass, I think, is the best. Then, on the other side of the coin, when you get out of your truck, I worked for two big trucking companies over the years as a company driver, two of the biggest, Schneider National and J.D. Hunt. And I worked out of a couple of terminals, each would change terminals a couple times. And you know, you walk into the terminal building, and if you find one dispatcher or two that are black, that's really a lot, okay? Usually it's all white faces at computers. And then it's worse than that at the next tier up, the managers and the owners of the trucking companies. They're all white, okay? I don't think there's a big trucking company out there that's owned by a black. And I also used Warner. Used their logistics for a while when I was a owner op, and Prime, all white. And then you have another portion of it, which is redlining. And similar to the redlining that was done in housing for black people. When I decided to become an owner-op, I had to get approval and whatnot. I got my financing through my trucking company and whatnot. All white people at the top, of course, right? And I got my financing, no problem. Okay, even though I had been through a bankruptcy a number of years earlier, they financed the truck for me, and good rate too, because they're trying to offload their equipment. They're going through a downturn, and but the black guys, they couldn't get a loan to save their fucking lives. Okay, so who were the owner ops? All the owner ops were white. Okay, because all the company drivers are black. So you see this on the economic level there, how it plays out, and so and it's like that in every industry. And the trucking industry is no fucking different than any of the others. And it's like we had another question. Well, how have I experienced white privilege? Give me one example. White guys that grew up as basically what we call up here valley trash. The more general term is white trash. And that's white people who are poor, okay? And there are a lot of them, okay? There's probably more poor white people than there are poor black people, just because there's a larger population of white people, all right? By percentage, it's smaller, but by numbers, there's a lot of them. And so they say, I don't have any fucking privilege. I lived like dirt. I lived in the same type of shitty apartment housing and whatnot, or dirt farms, or wherever they grew up, dirt poor farmer, West Virginia, something like that. But the thing is, there's all sorts of other experiences. I was watching, the videos from the UK, and when the demonstrations were going on, and the reporter was going around talking to people, and so what, why are you out here with Black Lives Matter and with this protest and the George Floyd thing, etc. And one of the kids, they interviewed a kid. She was probably about 10 years old, I would say 10 or 11 years old. And she said, well, I don't get it too much nowadays, but when I was in kindergarten, one of the other kids asked me, why was my skin black? Did I eat shit? Okay, this is kindergarten. This is happening to this kid. All right. Now, does your white kid get that shit happen to them in kindergarten? No. All right. And this is what they're growing up with. And you don't think by the time they're in high school, they don't hate black people? Hate white people? They hate them. Okay. And they're being systematically oppressed through the whole design of the system, and it's gone on for generations. Trying to stop it, it's a cultural thing. It's very, very hard to stop a cultural thing with legal action and so forth. We went through affirmative action, which was the idea of equal opportunity back. That was put into place back in the riots from the 60s that occurred in the Grace Society program that Lyndon Johnson put in place to basically quell the rioting. Okay, and it did. It worked. Okay, but it had a lot of blowback for it too, in terms of its economics, and white people began to resent that because they felt that blacks were helped disproportionately through affirmative action. They got into college easier and in front of better qualified white candidates, and that black people got more welfare, and it was harder for a white person to get public assistance and so forth. And those things were all true, right? And so there are a lot of resentment came up from that. So that's what I talk about when I'm talking about blowback and trying to legislate into existence equality. It's an attitude, and it's a social phenomenon. And it's very hard to change that. It has, a lot of inertia. It's been going for 400 years. So all that, I know I went on long, sorry. But all that being said, do you guys have any opinions on any of that, the economic end, how it affects jobs and glass ceilings and all that stuff, and then kids and their experience with it? Mansa, since how old were you when you moved to England?
Oh, I was quite young when I moved to England. I was like 4 years old. So I've been in England most of my life. To be honest, I didn't experience a lot of racism in school, and the way that people dealt with me. I've lived in Scotland, Edinburgh in Scotland, and I've lived in Norwich in England, Norfolk. You might be familiar with that, Surly. It was Norfolk, England, and Norwich is a capital of Norfolk, and it has a population of 200,000, so it's quite a small city. And I remember when I moved there, I swear I was like the only black person in Norwich. This was 1995 when I moved there, so I was quite young, and that's quite a while ago. But I never really experienced racism. At least not as a kid. And I think one of the things that is quite different with England is I find, I haven't lived in America, so my experiences could be way different. But, when I've gone there, it's always this language of, oh, that's a black person, that's a white person, that's a black person. It's a defining characteristic of someone. Before you describe the person and their personality, you have to distinguish they're white or black. And I feel that's the difference between England and America. Like, my name's Ibrahim. People would just call me Ibrahim. They wouldn't say I'm black. Whereas in America, they might say I'm a black guy. And I just think we just have to I feel that's one important step, is to kind of be a little bit colorblind, if it were. You judge the person on their own individual merits, and you don't bring up their white or black. Because I know one of the things that happened in my job is we had a new manager, and everyone just referred to him as his name. They just said his name, and I was like, okay, I had no idea he was going to be a black guy, because everyone just said his name. They didn't talk about, oh yeah, this guy, he's good, blah blah blah. He's a good manager. He did X, Y, and Z. No one said he's black. No one said he's white, and I just think that's the way to do it, because I just think, when you use language that distinguishes people, and kind of you get your mindset into like stereotypical behavior. And I think that's what can lead to certain things. Like, people have their own opinions of what blacks and whites and how they behave. And I just think, instead of talking about that, just talk about the individual. I think that helps.
Oh,
and I just...
Yeah. Yes, Shirley, you want to give
Certainly.
comment?
I think that is the way that people in my daughter's generation behave. That is what is to be hoped for. But the fact is, and I don't think there's any way around this, we've got a couple of generations of Americans that are just simply going to have to die before we can get to the kind of colorblindness, admirable colorblindness that you're talking about. We have a history to live down. I mean, post World War II, post Civil War, after the compromise of 1877 that gave the election to Rutherford Hayes with over Tilden, because the Electoral College was deadlocked, and the price for that was withdrawal of federal troops from the South, which meant the end of Reconstruction, the birth of Jim Crow, and the resurgence of the Ku Klux Klan, who, by the way, Ulysses S. Grant had sent the 7th fucking Cavalry into the South to hunt these terrorists down and put them to rest. And they hated that. They hated that. And so one of the things that they exacted was the withdrawal of federal garrisons. with the net result of some of the most ignoble episodes of American history. Not the, to say, lynchings and anti-black terrorism all through the South. There's a reason Billie Holiday made the song Strange Fruit famous. It's because it was a commonplace. And that's how the Klan and other associated whites struck terror into a black population. People like to refer to the great black migrations of the late 19th and early 20th century. It wasn't because people were so much in search of jobs, although they were, but it was a flight from white terrorism, the terror of the Klan that was aided and abetted by an utterly and completely corrupt white power structure, which is still, even this very day, clinging on to power. We see that Trump is going to stand up another one of his Nuremberg rallies on June 19th in Tulsa. This is the most racist dog whistle possible. Tulsa, of course, was the site of a great massacre in Greenwood district of Tulsa 99 years ago, where hundreds of black people were gunned down in what was known as the Black Wall Street, an area where people were doing very well, and white Oklahomans didn't like that so much, so they killed hundreds of black people. And June 19th is significant because that is the date known as Juneteenth, which is when blacks got the word that slavery was officially repealed and over. So the corrupt symbolism of this is probably over the head of most Americans, but it is a racist dog whistle of the first order. And I smell sulfur, so I suspect the greasy hand of Stephen Miller behind this. But I mean, this is what we're still dealing with. This we've got a history of of law and order excesses. Even the Democrats got on board. Bill Clinton, in his many calls for putting another 100,000 cops on the streets. Okay, crime was a big deal, but we wanted to get more cops on the streets. We went from this was a consequence of this broken windows approach to policing, where you've got to crack down hard on the smallest offenses so that you can keep them from becoming larger offenses. And this led to, no knock and stop and frisk and all of the excesses of the Bloomberg regime when mayor of New York. But all along, we keep giving the police more and more authority and subject them to less and less accountability. But, I think maybe I'll put a period on that and give this back to you.
And I think we have once again used up our time for today in discussing this topic. It is, of course, a very deep one, and it's going to put deep divisions into our society as we move along here. They're already there, but they're going to get worse. And that's, you can say that's true for almost every aspect of collapse. Coronavirus is just going to get worse, okay? Because, the business of America is doing business. And so states have opened up, and now all the states that have reopened, 20 of them or 25 of them, they've all seen coronavirus cases spike up again. And no, this is not a second wave, okay? This is still the first wave playing itself out. Second wave, you would see a full die down, and then it starts to pop back up again in October, November, something like that. That's how Spanish flu of 1919 and 1920 worked. There's a lot of characteristics that are the same with this virus. The approach here to trying to keep a lid on it is not working, okay? And it's not working because the leadership at the top are idiots, morons, subhuman, okay? That's all I can say. The people who are running this country right now. and it's very sad. And then there are so many other things that we have problems with that are going to escalate: the job problem, the economics, and so forth. You know, the funny money that the government is supposedly handing out that I haven't gotten. All right, but Wall Street's getting plenty of it. I think they authorized another $1 trillion or $2 trillion in bailouts for the big corporations and so forth. You know, got to keep those guys floating because you know they're important, and you are not, and neither am I. And they have power. Okay, so you know that's the nature of things. It's the nature of collapse, and we're immersed in it. And so you, as an individual, have to figure out how you're going to negotiate it. And that's a tough thing to do. Okay, I can't tell you how to do it, and it's different for everybody. It depends on where you live and all sorts of factors. How much money you have, how old you are, what kind of physical shape you're in. All those things play on how you can deal with the oncoming shitstorm. And that's all to do. This time until next time. Here, from the Collapse Cafe of the Doomsday Diner. Hasta la revoluzione.
I got a couple of questions.
That's all
actually.
right.